Now, the most important people who should have been here is not us, it should have been legislators. And we're going to find out how they fit into this whole thing. But anyway, thank you for showing up. We've got a lot of information at this table here. If you like to read computers, fine, we'll just send it to you on computer. We have a lot of hard copies here. We also have a membership sign-up sheet for those who want to join our new corporation called We the People of Maine, Inc. We found that the legislators here deal better with corporations than with people, so we incorporated. And now when we walk through the halls of the legislature, they hold out their hand and they welcome us, so must be doing something right. My name is Phil Merletti. I represent three groups: Take America Back, the Constitution Coalition, and as I said before, the new group called We the People of Maine, Inc. We also have on that corner table constitutions given to us by the Secretary of State. He refuses to give us any more. We've only got 380 of them. And we'd like to have him print more, but he says he's out of money, so we've got a problem there. I like the state of Constitution. From Connecticut, I came from Connecticut, I have my own.
Oh, cool.
The very first Constitution I ever read. Of course, it's a Constitution state, too. We have several speakers today. I want to introduce Steve Schran. He's joined our group. He's a representative for his town and his county, and we're looking for anybody else who would want to represent their town and their county. And if you're really into politics and you want to create your own committee, we'd be more than glad to have you come on board. If you're that interested, you're officially the co-founder of that committee, and if you want to get other people into your committee, I give you the right to pick anybody who you want to be able to do the research with you. So, on that, I'm going to let Steve Schran take over from here. If you need any information from us, if you need addresses as to how you can contact us, please stop and by and see us before you leave. Steve Schran.
Thank you, Phil. I'd like to read just a little bit of background for our guest speaker, Deborah Stevenson. Attorney Stevenson practices constitutional law, appellate law, educational law, and criminal law in a variety of courts, including Connecticut appellate and Supreme Courts, federal district courts, and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. She has written many articles on constitutional law and has given many lectures on the Constitution and individual rights and workshops held in several states across the country. She also serves as Chief Counsel for We the People of Connecticut, Incorporated, the nation's first lobby devoted solely to preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution. Would you please welcome Deborah Stevenson.
Well, thank you to all of you for inviting me here today. Please let me know if you can't hear me. I do tend to speak softly. I carry a big stick. It's called the Constitution. Anyway, today I've been asked to talk about Article 5 of the Convention of the States, because that's been in the news lately. And the question is, should or shouldn't we have a Convention of the States to amend the Constitution? I'm going to go through this a little basically, because really you have to understand the foundation in order to understand and answer the question for yourselves whether or not you would like to have a Convention of the States to amend the Constitution. The answer is really, that's up to you, whether we should have it or not, but you have to understand the underpinnings of the law. What is the law? What is our first, foremost, and most important law? Some people might say the Constitution. I say it's the Declaration of Independence. And there's a reason why I say that. It's because at that point, as we all know, some of this may be a little basic, but really you have to get this in your head so you can spread the word if people don't really get it today. Back at that time, where did our rights come from? They came from the king. The king gave us our rights. This was the first time in history where people declared No, our rights don't come from the king. Our rights come from God, our creator, natural rights, whatever we want to call that. We are born with those rights. And just so you really kind of get the language of the Declaration, it's important. I'm going to take a few minutes just to read a couple of the phrases from the Declaration. It says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. I'm going to read just a little bit more. I know you're familiar with some of this, but it's important. So they go on, and then they describe the long train of abuses from the King of England. And then they say the next paragraph that's important to me. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. That's why I call it the law. This established this country as a free and independent country and the powers of that country. So now we go on a little bit in history. And now we have a country, we're fighting a war, and now how are we going to run this country? Well, next comes the First Continental Congress. And the First Continental Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation. And that laid out how basically we were going to run this country, and that worked for a little bit. And then we had the Second Continental Congress called, for a lot of reasons, but one of which was because the Articles of Confederation had a few flaws in it. So we needed to fix those flaws. We needed to amend our first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation. So the Second Continental Congress got together, and this was the purpose. This was the Federal Convention of 1787, and the federal and state instructions to delegates. And this was in accordance with the first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation. In the Articles of Confederation, it stated in Article 13, the Continental Congress resolved on February 21st, 1787, to call a convention to be held at Philadelphia. For what purpose? For the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. Now that was what our Constitution at that time, the Articles of Confederation, said, how to amend the Articles of Confederation. We will do that by calling this Second Continental Congress. We will call this for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. The Continental Congress then authorized each of the then 13 states to appoint delegates to a convention. Sound familiar? This is what is being called for now. That's what happened then. Second Continental Congress called it to amend the Articles. Delegates were chosen, and what happened? Well, 12 of the states made laws respecting the appointment of delegates and issuing instructions to the delegates for what they were supposed to do at this convention. 10 of the states instructed their delegates to propose alterations or amendments to the Articles of Confederation. 2 other states gave instructions which arguably permitted their delegates to do more than just propose amendments or alterations. But what actually happened was the delegates ignored the federal and state limitations, and they wrote a whole new constitution. Constitution that you have and we have today. That's how it happened in history. Now, why did they do that? Why did they come up with a whole new Constitution? It goes back to the Declaration of Independence. Because they had unalienable rights when they saw a long train of abuses, to throw off the government that they had and to institute a new government. And that's exactly what they did. They threw off the Articles of Confederation and they instituted the Constitution. What does Article 5 of our current Constitution say? That's the article that says how to amend the Constitution. I'm going to read that to you as well. It says, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. In other words, there's two methods that you can amend the Constitution. One, Congress can propose the amendments, or two, Congress can call a convention of the states to have amendments. Congress calls a convention. In the second method, Congress would call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments that would be valid when 3/4 of the states ratified them. And Congress decides how the amendments are ratified. That's the current method in Article 5. Now, that's what it says. That's all of what it says. So if people are telling you, well, we have to be restricted or it can't be restricted, I want to just go through a little bit about what Article 5 does not say. And you can come up with your own list, but this is a list that I came up with. I just read you the whole article. What it doesn't say, how many amendments can be made? It doesn't say that. What kind of amendments may be made? It doesn't say that either. That only certain amendments may be made. It doesn't say that. Whether the entire Constitution may be amended. It doesn't say that. Whether an amendment may abolish the entire Constitution. It doesn't say that either. Whether an amendment may abolish the system of government, the three branches of the government. It doesn't say that. How about whether new powers may be granted by amendment to any branch, say the president? It doesn't say that. Whether delegates are bound by the purpose of the convention. It doesn't say that either. Who the delegates are going to be. Article 5 doesn't say that. Whether members of existing government may be delegates. Can Congress people be delegates to the convention? It doesn't say they can't. How the delegates are chosen. It doesn't say that either. How about the states may restrict how the delegates vote? Article 5 doesn't say that. States can do that. Or that a complete revision of the Constitution can't be made. It doesn't say that either. Or that a whole new Constitution may be adopted. It doesn't say that. There are lots of other things you can come up with that it doesn't say. So, people have been proposing a convention of the states and indicating, well, this is a way that we can limit and correct all the abuses that we have going on today in Washington, wherever. Now, there are some people who want to have a convention of the states for very good purposes, to try to fix things. And there are other people who may want to have a convention of the states, understanding the vagueness, really, the openness of Article 5, and may have their own reasons for wanting it to be that way. In other words, to have a new constitution. And apparently there are some new constitutions that have already been written by some people who would like to have that happen. I understand the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations produced the Constitution for the New States of America. If that's the new constitution that replaces our current constitution, then it's ratified by a referendum called by the president. See, so that could happen because Article 5 doesn't prevent that from happening. There's another one, another constitution waiting in the works, the Revolutionary Communist Party has written, called the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic of North America. And there's a Constitution 2020 movement funded by George Soros, who has apparently either is writing or has written a constitution or would like to write a constitution. Now, some of the other people who are proposing an Article 5 convention, Move to Amend Coalition, Alliance for Democracy, Center for Media and Democracy, Code Pink, Independent Progressive Politics Network, Progressive Democrats of America, Sierra Club, Vermont for Single Payer, and probably many other groups. Those are on the left. On the right, you have conservatives who are proposing it. Many famous names in the conservative movement. Mark Levin, for example. His purpose is to restore the republic. A method, he calls it a method for the states to take back control of an out-of-control federal government. And he calls it the last line of defense for liberty. That may be if the convention of the states that's called is refined to just do that. But when you are listening to people who are talking about the articles of the Convention of the States, you have to understand that you have to kind of analyze it and use your own common sense. Are they talking about what they would like to see, or are they giving you the facts about what can and cannot happen in accordance with our Constitution and our first law, the Declaration of Independence? Because you have to understand that that's our law, and you all, we are the people. We get to determine what form our government takes, and this is one method whereby we can do that. I understand that another conservative has come up here and talked to the group about Article 5 Convention, and that is Michael Ferris of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I'll give you some quotes that he has talked about as well. He has said this Article 5 Convention of the States is only one path available to us who want to preserve both liberty and the Constitution. We must use the power of the states to apply for an Article 5 Convention for the limited purpose of curbing abuse of power by Washington, D.C. He also said states have the authority and the duty to see to it that we stop Washington. And again, since Congress must call an Article 5 convention when 2/3 of the states make application, this is Mr. Ferris's comment, we must conclude that the historical practice has developed to require an agreement on the subject matter for the convention in order to call a convention. Now, I noticed in the quotes that Mr. Ferris has, and some of the other people out there, they talk in grandiose terms and in vague terms. We must conclude from historical practice that an agreement on the subject matter must be had when you call a convention of the states. Where does that say that in Article 5 is my question. These are some of the questions you need to ask people who are talking to you, both pro and con, about an Article 5 Convention of the States. What historical practice is he talking about? You have to question everything. Don't take it just on the face value, even what I'm saying. This is not rocket science. This is something that you can look up for yourself. What Article 5 actually says, what the Declaration actually says, what our Constitution says in general, and then what are people saying about it? Are they quoting it exactly, or are they paraphrasing it, or are they just wishing this would happen? A couple other quotes from Mr. Ferris. The process laid out by Article 5 is safe and will not lead to the adoption of any amendment beyond the purpose of the convention application. Is that what happened in the Second Continental Congress? I mean, if we're looking at historical perspective, if we're looking at what actually can and cannot be done and what's said in Article 5 itself, how can that be quote-unquote safe and will not lead to any adoption of an amendment beyond the purpose of the convention? Surely we have a constitution, the entire constitution, because it was not safe under the Articles of Confederation, and quite possibly could lead to that now. There's another quote that he said, "The states possess the complete ability to ensure that proper amendments are proposed and ratified to curb the abusive power of the federal government." Is that what's said in Article 5? Did I read you anything about the states have that power to ensure proper amendments? It's not there. This may be wishful thinking, or there may be some other reasoning he's using, but it's certainly not what's in the Constitution as it exists. A couple of other things he said. If states apply for an Article 5 convention, and if either Congress or convention uses the application as a basis for proposing an amendment for a different purpose, such states would have standing to file a challenge to the misuse of their application. Well, standing is a made-up rule of law made up by the courts to say whether you can and cannot use the courts. And so in that sense, I suppose they might have standing under the court's rule. But to challenge their misuse of the application, where is it a misuse of the application? Does Article 5 confine it to one particular purpose? Even if Congress called it for one particular purpose, does our first rule of law, the Declaration of Independence, say you cannot throw off that kind of government? No. So I'm not sure where the logic is coming from, but that's the kind of analysis you need to be doing when people say this. And the last thing, and I'm using his quotes, they were easy to find. These are some things that a lot of people are saying out there, not just Mr. Farrell. And the last thing he was saying, the dangers of a runaway convention are not worse than the abuses of government now. Well, the dangers of a runaway convention, runaway meaning we'll just throw off all of the government that we have, the Constitution itself. What if they do that? Is that worse or better? Maybe we'll come up with a new country, better Constitution, but maybe we won't. So that's his opinion and he's entitled to it. But think about what can happen under the existing law. Now, what are the alternative solutions to halting federal abuse of authority? Because certainly that's something we're all concerned about today. Certainly it's rampant in Washington today. There are a few things that you can do without going to a convention of the states that the founders also recommended. One, certainly, that they had in mind when they established the Constitution was that people of integrity, moral character would be in charge of the government. They knew absolutely that people are people and there would be corruption, and that's why they tried to separate things as much as they could in the Constitution. But certainly one key thing is enforcement of the existing Constitution. That's just common sense. So the people can do that, can take whatever method that they want, whether it's whistleblower, whether it's whatever method to enforce the existing Constitution. Certainly that is a step that can be taken without going to a convention of the states. What are some of the other safeguards in our current Constitution? Well, there's two in particular that were used, and based on those safeguards, they were used successfully and historically. You talk about historical background. The Constitution was written and approved by the Continental Congress, but it took more than 2 years before the last state voted for ratification. So they wrote the Constitution, they sent it out to the states. 2 years later, it was ratified. In that 2-year time period, there was a lot of debate about the Constitution. Should we adopt it? Shouldn't we adopt it? The debate was, should the federal government be strong? Should the states be strong? Who should be stronger? This was debated by the founders themselves using pseudonyms. And what we now know, we call them today the
federal government, including abortion, euthanasia, and all. This is the new agenda. Sorry, telling you a lot in a few minutes, huh? So, if I were you, I'm really thrilled that Deborah's up here today. As I said, I am ignorant myself on the Constitution. I get upset when something like the U.S. Department of Education is going to run every single American's lives lifelong. I begin to think that might be unconstitutional. And that is why we must all ask ourselves, why are the neoconservatives doing this to us? Why is Michael Farris doing it to us? Why is William Bennett doing it to us? Why is every single conservative organization in this country doing it to us? They want this. Look, when the second largest entity, budget-wise, in the federal government, discretionary terms, after defense, does not have an elected board running it. Charter schools are public schools. The only difference is they do not have an elected school board. So when we allow this to go down the tubes, and no parent, the ones fighting Common Core, they can fight all they want, and they may kill it for a while, but I say it's like a worm, you cut it in half, it grows back, huh? It will never go back, it'll have another label. The only thing that's going to happen to these poor parents fighting Common Core is they will have nothing left but their charter school, because the public schools will have been destroyed by then deliberately. I love Lou Gerstner of IBM. He wants to bring down all 16,000 public schools. Why? Because they have elected boards. I even like Reed Hastings of Netflix even better. He loves charter schools. You know why? Because they don't have elected boards. Therefore, charter schools are to implement the Soviet Polytech workforce training system, period. That was called for in the agreements Reagan signed with Gorbachev in 1985, merging the two systems. Now, Reed Hastings even manages to say, we have a great videotape of him. It's not just schools he wants to get control of for workforce training, it's all elected boards across the country. That's what Reed Hastings says. He doesn't want elected boards. He wants nonprofit. Those groups that really care. So what I'm trying to say here is that I can't wait to get to know Deborah better. What we're dealing with is a two-pronged thing. You're dealing with the Constitutional Convention, which is terribly dangerous. Anybody read Rexford Tugwell's new Constitution? Google it. Don't think he may be dead, but that's not dead. We're dealing with two very serious issues. You have to take a different look at school choice. If what I've told you today is not going to help you understand it, I don't know. You can go to, we've got a pretty good little blog, ABCs of dumbdown.blogspot.com. And that takes all the research from my deliberate dumbing down of America, which was boycotted by all the conservatives as well, takes all that research and applies it to what's being done to you now, and shows that everything that is happening now was planned. Documents. That's the deliberate dumbing down of America. It's a free download at deliberatdumbingdown.com. I have to mention this today because within 2 weeks, the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is going to pass, I am afraid. And if it does, we little band of chickens, there are about 20 Americans who are onto what they're doing. I'm sorry, only 20. We've worked together since the late 60s. We know that if this bill passes, you won't even have to worry about Con-Con. This bill will kill the Constitution. It's going to take the money, follow the child, each child, everything has to be equal across the country. Equal. Everybody has, would that sound familiar? Redistribution of wealth, equality, under equality and equity. They are going to start funding through Title I, that may mean nothing to you, it didn't used to me, that used to be handicapped kids and kids who had problems and all. Good program it was. They're taking Title I, they're expanding its use to all children. They will all have a voucher in their backpack. They will go to whatever school the government and the corporations, because they're together, corporate fascism, designate for that child to be trained. They will have a backpack full of all kinds of vouchers. This will spread out, and I was reading something by a Harvard lawyer this morning about this, it was on C-SPAN. He says, in order to have equity, we've got to have the voucher system. Well, within the reauthorization of the ESEA, you have a super voucher. I suggest all of you go and look at H.R. 5. That is Republican Representative Klein's bill, H.R. 5, and then you have Senator Lamar Alexander's bill as well. Now, the two are getting along very well, unfortunately, and it is probably going to pass, and this is very serious business. You can either Google reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act or HR 5 and become aware. But the blog is probably the best place because we really have, we've really got it all down for you, all the details, certainly over the past 2 months, from the experts on this subject of the Constitution. And I wouldn't be here today if I didn't care about the Constitution. I do. I saw it law. Actually, I leaked a document. You know how come? I leaked a document in the U.S. Department of Ed because it was unconstitutional. I got fired. I lost a $70,000 a year. I loved it when you said whistleblowing. Yes, I got fired. And before I went in there, though, I was asked by my boss about a month before. I thought it was a weird question. Charlotte, are you going to be loyal? And I thought, yeah, of course. But when I got in there, I knew what he meant. He meant, are you going to be loyal to the Reagan administration? So I was disloyal to the Reagan administration. I leaked the document, but I was loyal to my Constitution. And so you've got a lot from me right now, but it's very important to get this out because we cannot get this word out except through, the alternative media. Jeff Rentz has been great. We've now got John Wells. Look at those. This is the alternative media telling the American people the truth. So between Deborah and our people, this is a constitutional matter. These are vital. The more I look at how they're circling us, see? It's not just Concord. They've got us over here on education. What else have they got? They've probably got other things, maybe through the Veterinaries Association. Well, no, the vets are good. They stay out of this stuff. But really, you have got to focus and take what I've said and what Deborah, I'm going back, I'm going to do some work I should have done a long time ago on the Federalist Papers. And we've got to get this word out. Our children have got to understand it. But the people who've got to understand it the most, you know where they are? They're on the Senate Education Committee and on the House Republican Education Committees. They are traitors. When you read that bill, lifelong services for all of us under the umbrella of the unelected school district, community service, lifelong, we call it limited learning for lifelong labor. That's going through in a couple of weeks if you don't do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me some time. Thank you, Charlotte, for all your hard work. We really appreciate it. And also, that just ties into what I was saying. What do we do about all these things? Well, again, we're here about the Article 5 Convention of the States. Should we do that? Should we have it? Should we not? But if you choose, and if it really is as bad as Charlotte, and I don't doubt her for a second, I really wholeheartedly, I worked on the Common Core issue. But if you are of the mind to oppose the Constitutional Convention of the States, then one way I strongly suggest is interposition and nullification, but mainly working on, right here in this building, on your legislators, because they're the ones who have the power to do something, to stand up to the federal government. If you can educate just a few members of the House or the Senate, and then sitting down with them in your coffee shop, in the grocery store, whatever time you have, it really does work. You can get at these people locally. If you can educate them and convince them that what their power is, at least you might be able to stop some of what's going on by having the state say no, interposing itself, even if it doesn't nullify anything, and trying to do, I mean, this is a long-term problem, and it's going to be a long-term solution, but it's getting worse, and it's up to you to choose what way to do it. But any other questions? Yeah?
Just a quick one. How powerful or not powerful, like short-term or long-term, would grassroots groups effectively create the opportunity for young people to learn the principles and philosophies and practices and history of the Constitution?
Well, I think that that's very important to do. I mean, yeah, it could be a long-term solution, but you have kids now in all these schools and it's going to get worse and they're going to be trained into one particular area. You as parents, at least, have an opportunity perhaps. I know the homeschooling groups get together all the time and they teach their children whatever. You could have a club, a Constitution club, for example, like the Boy Scouts or another club, to just sit down and teach these few basic things so that maybe that would carry on if they do have to go to a public school or a private school that's teaching Common Core. At least something will stick and say, well, now wait a minute, that doesn't sound right because I thought this is our document here and that what you're saying doesn't match with this. So I don't know, but I think that's a good idea. There may be other ways. Yep. Yeah, sure.
If all this doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. I just wanted to follow up on your question here. How many of you know that in 1825 there was a law passed in the state of Maine that mandated the state of Maine to teach every child in the school system here in Maine, both the lower schools plus the colleges, to teach the U.S. and Maine Constitution. How you doing? Hey. So being a researcher, we found this law. Went to the Secretary of State because in the first section of this law says that the Secretary of State will print 10,000 U.S. constitutions and 10,000 Maine constitutions and deliver them to the local authorities, which at that time were the selectmen, so it's local control, local towns who would pass this out to the schools, and that it would go on forever. Well, a lot of the Maine students that I've spoke to around here, and people our age, and they'd say, geez, I don't ever remember being taught about the U.S. and Maine constitutions. Wow, how come they're not following the law? Off to the Secretary of State's office we go. We meet with the Secretary of State and showed him the law. He looks at that and he says, geez, I'm required to print 10,000 constitutions. Now, we've already got 380 constitutions from him this past year, and he refuses to give us any more because they don't have the money to print any more of these. So I said, well, how are we going to get 10,000 constitutions out to the kids so they can read them? He says, see the governor. We met with the governor for 16 hours in the year 2013, and this subject came up. We had several people, including Steve Schramm, meeting with the governor, and we talked about Common Core, and he says, there'll be no Common Core in the state of Maine. So we're asking the governor to see him again on this issue, on getting monies appropriated to the Secretary of State so he can print these constitutions. But wait a minute, there's no curriculum to teach the kids that. So off to the Commissioner of Education here, his name is Tom Desjardins, and had 2 meetings set up with him. Both times he canceled them out at the last moment. So someone gave me his telephone number and I called him up. Because he shook up when I called him up yesterday. He said, how do you get this number? I said, well, a good friend of mine gave me the number, and now I'm talking to you. And I explained to him that there's a state law mandating all the school systems in the state of Maine to teach the U.S. and Maine constitutions. And he says, oh, he says, I've already taken care of that. And I said, you have? He says, well, I was contacted by the Secretary of State and the governor's office, and we didn't know what to do with that law. He says, so we contacted the Attorney General. So he tells me that the Attorney General tells him that the state of Maine cannot force the schools to teach curriculum. What? What are they doing now with Common Core and everything else that they've been doing? The state of Maine has been creating and containing and fabricating all this education to teach the kids. So I said, can you get that paper to me? No, he hasn't got it to me yet because that was yesterday. But yes, the state of Maine is supposed to teach the Maine Constitution, And it is supposed to teach the U.S. Constitution. Now, let's look at this. How many of you have seen your kids' curriculum books? How hard would it be to teach this? Now, I've got to admit, it's confusing at times, and you have to learn how these two work together and how the legislators would use both of these constitutions. But when I speak to the legislators, I say to them, have you ever read this? Have you ever read this? And they all say, no. Did you not take an oath to support the U.S. and the Maine constitutions? Yes. Well, how do you do that if you don't read them? Then I say to the people, the average person out there, you ever read the Maine Constitution? What? Maine Constitution? You mean Maine has a constitution? This is the reason why the legislators in the state of Maine get away with what they do, because the people haven't read these things. Now I go over there to the Secretary of State's office and walk out of there with cases and cases of constitutions. We had 7 symposiums over the summer asking the legislators to show up. The people show up. The important people also are the legislators, because they're the ones who use these. We're supposed to be watching the legislators to make sure they use these. Nobody reads the Constitution, so now you know how they get away with what they do. I keep looking around, but I don't trust people behind me.
Well,
Especially that old.
Phil, the reason that they don't know about the U.S. Constitution is that they've been passing bills with appropriations for money to fund global education in the schools ever since the early 1980s. I mean, I've seen all the laws in it, so next time you go in there with that, you ought to say, hey, wait a minute now, this is only fair. How about, along with the global education curriculum that we've been paying for and taking money from the feds, put in, couldn't we just have the original, which won't cost you anything? They know very well that they've been putting this in. The Department of Ed has been getting all of this stuff passed.
Charlotte, I wish you could be here every week. I've tried to go in front of the Legislative Council to get them to mandate the legislators to read this, to study it, to understand how to use this in creating laws, and they haven't necessarily said no yet, but they have put me off. They're the only people in the legislative halls here who have the right to mandate the legislators to read this. Now, why should they be mandated to read it when they gave an oath to support it to begin with? They should have taken it in their heart to bring it home and study it and study it. We've been doing this for 5 years now. And yes, it's hard to understand how you can put these two together and to make law. But we've given the opportunity to the legislators over the summertime. We've given the legislators a chance to do this now. And are they here today? Are you a legislator?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to hug you when nobody's looking. Thank you for showing up. You see, there's another 150 representatives out there who aren't here, 149, and there's 35 senators. Are they out there learning about the Constitution? No. So how the heck are they going in there learning or passing laws? They don't know what they're doing. Is this fraud when they say they're going to support
Yes,
these?
it is.
This is fraud. Now, I said to the Secretary of State the other day, when should a legislator read the Constitution? Before they give the oath or after they give the oath? I would even give them the chance after. But I don't know how many of these legislators get voted in year after year. Even the Nicky New guys that I call up on the phone and I say to them, we can supply the Constitution for you, and if you don't want to take it from us because you think that we reprint it to our agenda, go online. The Maine Gov has a copy of the Maine Constitution. You can even get the U.S. Constitution. There's a law library right down the corner here that has constitutions all the way back to 1820. And you can see how they changed the Constitution on you. But the legislators don't even know how to open that door over there. But yet, I traveled 200 miles to come over here to use that law library. They don't use it. So, the problem is twofold. It's the legislators who won't read it, who won't study it, who won't understand it, and it's the fault of the people, too, for not doing the same thing. Yes, Blaine?
My sense, Blaine Richardson ran an unsuccessful campaign to run for Congress. However, there are 30,000 people that think the way I do. As a Navy captain, and in the flight program before I got my commission, we had a 3-hour, before we got our commission, class on the United States Constitution, because we were told we will be, when we're commissioned as ensigns in the service, we will be taking a constitutional oath. And having just got done reading 2 biographies on Sam Adams, part of this whole gift of freedom and liberty that we got works if you're an honorable person, you have integrity, and it's you know, based in a belief in God. And one of the things that's happened, one of my observations is, you know, we want to rip God out of everything that we do. And in the end, that's sort of the big eye that, you know, watches you. Are you doing this with no human watching you? You know, the integrity aspect. And we're seeing it in Washington, D.C. right now, and it frustrates me with my military leaders. I watched that Submariner Admiral up there speaking for the Pentagon, and I'm telling you, I could go up and rip his water wings off. He took a constitutional oath, and that man has lied.
Yes.
He's lied to the people. Unfortunately, we have no mechanism to enforce this oath that the feds take, the military takes, other than the honor as an individual. And I find it frustrating. And we just keep going further and further down the rabbit hole. If you took an oath, you need to know what it is you're taking an oath on.
That's right.
And I'm very frustrated.
Blaine, I'm going to agree with you, but I'm going to disagree with you on one thing here. There is one group of people who do have the right to put teeth into that, and that is the U.S. military.
Absolutely.
They've taken the oath to protect and defend the Constitution. The legislators only take, and if you read this in here, Article 9, Section 1, they give an oath to support the Constitution. Big difference between putting your life on the line for the Constitution and only supporting the Constitution. How easy it is to support the Constitution.
Well, I was trying to be careful there. At the end of the day,
That sounds like a coup when you start talking
you know,
about
George
that.
Washington, a lot of what we do with presidents and our elections and whatnot were set by the behavior that George Washington exhibited with Congress. There were a lot of people that were afraid of him becoming a king, you know, but he said, no, 2 terms is enough. And so that became the standard. Well, I would submit to you that the commander-in-chief is